I think this is a much welcome extension of the East-West line, 7.5 kilometers, 4 stations, and I think it will benefit, we think, up to about 100,000 commuters every day, extending the lines to the western part of Singapore beyond Joo Koon. In tandem with this, we will also, of course, bring in new trains. Last year, we brought in 22 trains onto the north-south, east-west lines. In 2014, we will have another 13 trains, and then by about 2016, another 22 new trains will come in. So that's significant expansion to the capacity, and over the course of the next 5 years, we will also be expanding the rail network with a new portion of the network being opened every year. Okay.
Do you want to say a bit more about the 900 million?
That SMRT Mr. Tanekia talked about. Well, what I would say is that I understand that the two main components that contribute to the cost would really be the replacement of the sleepers and the resignaling, the upgrading that we talked about earlier. So these are two areas that we had anticipated that we need to do because the sleepers, some of them are already close to 25 years old. There is, of course, a lifespan to these sleepers. They need to be replaced. Some of the work is already being done. So there's a stretch of the Woodlands portion that is being replaced. But we think that we ought to do a comprehensive replacement of the sleepers. And hence I had mentioned previously in my visit to Mr. Ang Heng Kee's ward that we are considering the possibility that we may have to close off stretches of the rail lines in order for the sleeper replacement works to proceed more smoothly. On how the $900 million is going to be apportioned between government and the operator, this is still being discussed between LTA and the SMRT. Broadly speaking, I think the formulation is that infrastructural works come under the government, replacement of the operating assets come under the operator, although even within that there is a formula on how to share the cost. So the thing now that is happening between LTA and SMRT is that they are going through the details and making sure that each party is paying its fair share of the cost.
Can you give commuters some reassurance that all this 900 million will not come out of fares, a fare increase?
Well, the fare increase is actually determined by the fare adjustment formula. I think we are aware that the fare adjustment formula takes into account the macroeconomic factors, like, for example, the inflation as well as the wage increase with a productivity extraction. Now, the fare formula is being reviewed this year. Committee is led by Mr. Magnus. So the outcome of that, I would not know whether he will make any adjustments to the fare formula. All right? But we will take this year to consider it as well as for him to seek the views of the public. What happens is that this year there will be no fare adjustment, as I mentioned in Parliament previously. All right? But I would say that based on the formula that we use today, we consider the macroeconomic factors. We, of course, look at the profits of the operators as one of the factors to be considered in whether to allow them the full adjustment to take place. All right? So that is how it has always been done.
Given that the rail network needs time to be expanded, and the bus plan also takes some months to come on board, now commuters are being faced with a situation where COE numbers are also limited. So do you see any need to kind of turn the tap on a bit more on the car side?
Well, on COEs, I had announced in October last year that we would have to reduce the growth rate. It will still grow, but reduce the growth rate from 1.5% to 0.5% beginning in the second half of 2012. I think we understand the reasons for that, which is that really there is a finite limit as to how much we can expand the road network. All right, and while in the past we had grown the vehicle population by 3% and then slowing it down to 1.5%, we do need to bring it down further so that it keeps pace with the growth of the road network. I understand the concerns that have been raised, and indeed they are valid, because I think going down to 0.5% would constrain the growth of the vehicle quota numbers somewhat. And also the prices have been rising in the recent bidding exercises. Also with the data that I now have, which I did not have previously, based on the deregistrations that have been taking place over the last few months, and the behavioral changes of car owners in that they are probably holding on to their cars longer than previously, I think if we proceed with the plan as we had envisaged earlier, it will put quite a significant squeeze, all right, on the vehicle quota numbers. So I have actually asked LTA to study very carefully two areas. One area is whether we can more flexibly slow down the growth rate, okay? Rather than from 1.5% dropping to 0.5%, whether we can be more flexible in the implementation of this, while we recognize that 0.5% is indeed the target that we want to achieve. So they will study very carefully whether we can exercise some flexibility in this regard. The second area that I've asked them to look at, also partly in response to the feedback that we have received from both commuters, potential car buyers, as well as the motor traders, is whether we can defer somewhat the adjustment of the over-provision of COEs that we have made in 2008, 2009. We had originally wanted to make the adjustment over a one-year period, right? And then that was subsequently extended so that we would make the adjustments of the over-provisions over a 3-year period. And that has been going on, I think, for the last year, year and a half. I've asked them to see whether there is a possibility that we would defer the adjustment, okay? Knowing that in the second half of 2013 into 2014 and so on, the number of COEs that will be available because of the deregistrations of cars reaching the 10-year cycle and so on will be significantly higher than what it is today. So two things that I've asked LTA to consider very carefully, whether we can exercise some flexibility moving from 1.5% to 0.5%, and the other is whether we can defer the adjustments on the over-provision of COEs that we had done in 2008, 2009. I hope to have an answer by the end of this month, and then we can have more details then when we have looked at this matter sufficiently. Okay? So that's the thinking at this point in time.
So what kind of facility you wish to see from 1.5% say to 1%?
I think it is good to allow LTA the time and space to look at this without predetermining or prescribing at this point in time what the formulation should be.
So the 0.5% is an eventual target still, but it's just maybe going to take longer.
Yes, we do think that really for the vehicles to grow at a rate that far outpaces the growth of the road network, you're going to have great difficulty. Yes, you can use ERP, but I think we've always said that we ought to use both instruments. The growth of the vehicles, we need to control that, and also the use of the ERPs on usage and congestion pricing. We hold to that, and the thing to do is to allow LTA the time to take a look at it, and within the next few weeks we should be able to complete our assessment on this.
You said, are you going to relook maybe in terms of the financing of the car, example, zero down payment for a car, like now quite prevalent because it encourage people to spend beyond their means and buy.
Well, this thing about spending beyond the means, so we actually looked at the data to see what's the default rate for car loans. Actually, the default rate is very, very low, very low. And we had discussed this with MAS. MAS, Monetary Authority of Singapore, does not think that the default rate is certainly any area of concern whatsoever at this point in time, because people are able to keep up with their payments. So this thing about, that they are buying beyond their means, I do not have the data that substantiates that statement.